各位两岸三地的企业家朋友们，大家好！很荣幸有请到世界第一名的谈判大师、国际谈判专家权威 Roger Dawson 罗杰道森本人来到两岸三地的现场，跟大家指导如何用谈判赚大钱的方法。
I'm proud to tell you that I've been invited by Andy Du of Fortune Education to come to China and to Taiwan to teach you how to power negotiate. See you there, it'll change your life. And I've devoted my lifetime to building relationships with premier business people around the world. And Mr. Anson Du is now joining with me to do seminars in China and in Taiwan. So I'm very proud of my association with him. He's a wonderful person. He'll do a terrific job in teaching you how to power negotiate, how to communicate better, how to make more money in business, and how to successfully negotiate. We're going to talk today about the negotiating gambits, or tactics as I call them. These are the things you do during the negotiation to get advantages in the situation. If you play chess, you know there are beginning gambits to get the game started in your direction. There are middle gambits when you want to maintain the momentum. And then there are ending gambits when you get ready to checkmate the other person or, in business parlance, put the deal together. Let's go to rule number 1, which is you should never say yes to the first proposal, however good it looks. There is a predictable sequence of responses that will go through anybody's mind anytime you say okay to the first suggestion. So predictable that I'll have you tell me what they are. Fair enough? Let's say that your daughter is going off to college and you need to buy her a car. And the people down the street have one for sale, and they're asking 100,000 RMB for it. And at that, it is a terrific buy. There's not a thing wrong with the price. You can't wait to get down there and snap it up before somebody else beats you to it. But on the way down there, you start thinking to yourself, well, I'll be a good negotiator. Just to see what happens, I will make them a super low offer for the car. I'll offer them 80,000 RMB. Now, I know I'm not going to get it for that, but maybe we'll split the difference. It'll be an even better buy. So you sit down with the husband and wife that own the automobile, and you present your 80,000 RMB offer. Now, you're expecting them to react with rage at such a low offer. What actually happens is one turns to the other and says, well, what do you think, dear? And the other one says, fine, let's go ahead and sell it. What is your first reaction? Are you thinking, wow, what a terrific negotiator I am. I could not have done it for an RMB less. Is that what you're thinking? I don't think so. What are you thinking? You're probably thinking, I could have done better. I should have gone in lower. Now, the interesting thing about that is it has absolutely nothing to do with the price. It only has to do with the way that they reacted to the proposal. What if you'd have gone in at 70,000 or 60,000 or 50,000? And they said, sure, we'll take that. Wouldn't you still think you could have done better? And what's the second response you have when people jump at an offer that you didn't expect them to take? Probably something's wrong with the car. There's something going on here that I don't understand if they're willing to say yes to an offer that I didn't think they would. And those same two reactions will go through anybody's mind anytime you say okay to the first suggestion. If your child came to you and said, could I borrow your car tonight? And you said, you bet, take it, have a wonderful time. Wouldn't he or she automatically think, I could have done better. I could have got money for the movie out of this thing. And wouldn't they automatically think, hey, how come they want me out of the house? What's going on here that I don't understand? So what does this teach you? This teaches you that you always go through the process of negotiating. Even if the first offer is perfectly acceptable to you, even if that's what you'll end up doing, you go through the process of negotiating because you want the other side to feel that they won in the negotiation. Far more important that they feel that they won than that you feel that you won. In fact, I'd almost give you that as a definition of a power negotiator. Two people may go out to negotiate something, and they're in exactly the same circumstances. And they both come away with exactly the same numbers. But the power negotiator comes away with the other side feeling that they won. The poor negotiator comes away with the other side feeling that they lost. This is a very simple principle to talk about. It's very easy to understand, nothing complicated here. It's very hard to do when you're in the thick of a tense negotiation and the proposal from the other side is better than you thought it was going to be, and you're so relieved that it wasn't worse, you find yourself saying yes too quickly, automatically triggering those two thoughts in their mind. I could have done better, and next time I will. If something comes up during this process that needs to be renegotiated, I'm going to be a tougher negotiator. And something's wrong here. Maybe I need to talk to a competitor before I go ahead. Something's going on that I don't understand. So rule number one is don't say yes to the first proposal. Now, I thought that was a 100% rule until a fellow called me from Los Angeles, and he said, Roger, I was driving down Hollywood Boulevard last night listening to your audio program in my car. I stopped at a gas station to use the restroom. As I came back out to my car, somebody stuck a gun in my ribs and said, okay, buddy, give me your wallet. He said, well, I just been listening to your program. So I said, look, here's what I'm prepared to do. I'll give you the cash, but let me keep the wallet and the credit cards. Fair enough? The guy said, buddy, you didn't listen to me, did you? Give me the wallet. Yes, sir. So sometimes you don't negotiate. In this litigious age, that's my disclaimer, sometimes you don't negotiate, but it's almost a 100% rule. Don't say yes to the first proposal. In this session, we're going to talk about the middle negotiating gambits, the things you do as the negotiation progresses to keep the momentum going. First point I want to make is avoid confrontational negotiations. That's one of the problems I have with the way that most attorneys or lawyers negotiate. They're very confrontational. You get that envelope with the raised black lettering in the top left-hand corner, and you think to yourself, oh no, what is it this time? And what's the first communication you have from the other side? It's a threat, what they're going to do to you if you don't do what they want you to do. So it's very confrontational. I don't agree with that style of negotiating. I think you're better off to agree with people and then turn it around later. So let's say that a buyer says to one of your salespeople, wow, your prices are way higher than your competitors. And the salesperson says, no, they're not. We check this out all the time. We're right in line with legitimate competition. That's saying, I'm right, you're wrong. That forces the other side to substantiate their position. It forces the other side to prove that they are right. I think you're better off to agree and then turn it around by saying, you know, I understand exactly how you feel about that. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, most people, when they first hear about our program, have felt exactly the same way as you do right now. Now you are agreeing with them based on the amount of information they have up to this point. But you know what we have always found when we sit down and talk about this and talk about what's best for you too? Everybody always agrees that we have the best value in the marketplace. Feel, felt, found. I understand exactly how you feel about that because many other people have felt the same way. But we have always found. Don't argue with people, agree with them, and then turn it around up front. Let's talk about reluctant buyer, reluctant seller. It would seem fairly obvious that if you approached a seller with great enthusiasm, you wouldn't get a very good buy. But it's amazing how often I see that rule being broken. Particularly in car showrooms. I'll see somebody go into a car showroom and get so excited about a particular make and model of car. They'll pick out the colors, the upholstery, the options. They might even say to the salesperson, my car broke down today, I need something to get to work in tomorrow, and then they expect to negotiate a good price. It simply doesn't work that way. You always play the reluctant buyer role. Let's say that you are in charge of buying new computer software for your company. You let the salesperson come in, you let them set up their demonstration. You let them go through the whole thing. Let them take all the time that they want. And when you cannot think of another thing to say, you say, wow, I really appreciate all the time that you spent on this, but unfortunately this is just not the way we want to go. You see their look of excitation go from here down to here. They start to package the stuff up, they start to leave. At the very last minute, you come back with this magic expression. There's some magic expressions in negotiating. If you use them at exactly the right moment, it's amazing how predictable the response of the other side is. Just as they're disappearing out the door, you say, wait a minute, I really do want to be fair to you. You've obviously put so much work into this. Just to be fair to you, what is the very lowest price you would give us? Now, this is remarkably effective for squeezing the negotiating range. It is not the end of the negotiations. It's not even the beginning of the negotiations. We're just squeezing their expectations up front. Now, must be in your primary supplier now, don't you think? Well, yes, that probably is a good idea. I don't have time to talk about it now, but why don't you come by Monday and we'll talk about it. And the problem is the value of what you did for them goes downhill quickly. Monday rolls around, they're just as tough to deal with as they ever were. It teaches you that if you make a concession in the negotiation, get a reciprocal concession right away. Don't wait. Don't be sitting there thinking, well, I did this for them, they'll make it up to me later. With all the goodwill in the world, that doesn't happen because of this principle. It teaches you, if you're on a consulting basis, negotiate your fee up front, not afterwards. Plumbers know this, don't they? You ever know a plumber come to your house and start work before they negotiated the fee? Had a plumber out to the house. He said, Mr. Dawson, I know what the problem is. It'll cost you $150. I said, fine, go ahead. You know how long it took him to do the work? 5 minutes. I said, wait a minute. You're going to charge me $150 for 5 minutes work? I'm a nationally known speaker and I don't make that kind of money. And he said, well, I didn't make that kind of money either when I was a nationally known speaker. Let's talk about the hot potato. This is a kind of game that kids play at a barbecue where you put hot potatoes on the fire and then you toss them around. And of course, you want to get rid of a hot potato as quickly as you possibly can. But hot potatoes in negotiating are very interesting situations when the other side tries to give you what is essentially their problem. What the international negotiators will tell you about this is anytime the other side tries to give you what is essentially their problem, you need to test it for validity right away. Don't wait. You've got to jump on it right now and find out whether it really is a deal killer or whether it's just something they threw out to see what your reaction would be. I always remember being up in Anchorage, Alaska at the Hilton Hotel there, and I needed a late checkout. I went down to the lobby. There were two young people standing right next to each other behind the reception desk. And I said to one of them, would you please give me a 6 o'clock checkout in my room? And they said, well, Mr. Dawson, we could do that, but of course we'd have to charge you for an extra half day. So testing for validity, I said, who would have the authority to waive that charge? I thought she was going to say somebody up in an office somewhere. But she said, oh, she would. The person standing right next to her. I said, well, how would you feel about that? And she said, oh, sure, we can do that. Don't worry about it. No problem. Sometimes it's that simple. Don't let other people give you their problems. Test for validity. We've been talking about the gambits that we play during the negotiating game, the beginning and the middle. Now we're going to talk about the ending gambits, the things you do when you get closer to putting the deal together. Other things come into effect here. Good guy, bad guy. I'm sure you've all seen the old police movies where the suspect is brought in for interrogation, and the first detective to interrogate him is a rough, tough, mean-looking guy. Threatens him with all kinds of things they're going to do. He's mysteriously called away to take a phone call, and the second detective who's brought in to look after the prisoner is just the warmest, nicest, friendliest person in the whole world. He sits down with the prisoner and says, listen, kid, it's really not that bad. I know the ropes around here. I've taken a liking to you. Why don't you let me see what I can do for you with them? and there's a real temptation to think that the good guy's on your side. Then he would close on what salespeople would recognize as a minor point close. I think all the detectives really need to know is, where did you buy the gun? What they really want to know is, where did you bury the body? But it's a lot easier when you start out with a minor point and then build on that. I think you're familiar with this gambit in China, and you call it red face, white face. It's the same technique. It's used on you a lot more than you might believe. Look out for it anytime you're dealing with two people. It could be purchasing agent, vice president, husband, wife, partners. Anytime you see two people together, chances are they'll use some variation of it on you. So let's say that your salesperson has made an appointment to meet with the purchasing director at a potentially big client. And when he gets there, he finds out that the vice president in charge of procurement is going to sit in on this presentation, which is negotiating 2-on-1. You normally try to equalize the negotiating team, so he's at a bit of a disadvantage here already. He goes ahead, everything's going along fine, until all of a sudden the vice president... Some of you would just turn to the other person and said, well, I'll tell you what I have available, $100. That's called unilateral disarmament. In business, unilateral disarmament is the buyer who's saying, we don't like to negotiate at this company. We don't think it's the fair way to do business. So you just give us your very best proposal, and we will either take it or not take it, because we don't like to negotiate. They're lying to you. They love to negotiate. That is negotiating, seeing if you can get them to make all of their concessions before the negotiation even gets started. Now, strangely enough, here's what we're all tempted to do. We start with a small concession, maybe $10. As time pressure builds, our concessions get bigger, $20, and bigger, $40, bigger, $60. Look what we're communicating to the other side now. Hang in there, because the longer you do, the better it's going to get. What makes more sense is start with a reasonable concession, maybe $40. Taper down the size of the concessions, $30, $20, $10, $5. Now you're subliminally communicating to the other side that you've been pushed as far as you can be pushed. But power negotiators can do even better than that. Power negotiators know the art of taking a concession off the negotiating table. Now, you don't do this with someone who's negotiating in good faith. This is just for the people who are grinding away on you and won't be happy until they get the last dollar off the table. With these people, you can, if you take a concession off the negotiating table, it establishes in their mind that you've reached your bottom. In this session, we're going to talk about what makes you a good negotiator. What characteristics do you need to be an excellent world-class negotiator? An expression I hear a lot is, oh, he's a born negotiator, or she's a born negotiator. That couldn't be true. Read the birth announcements in your local newspaper. You will never see one that says, at the hospital yesterday, a negotiator was born. This is a learned skill, much like everything else we deal with. And what we're going to talk about now is some of the things that make you good at it. Number one is the understanding and the belief that there is pressure on the other side just as much as is on you. Think about this for a minute. They're saying they can get a better deal from somebody else. Why haven't they done that already? Something brought them to the negotiating table. You don't know what it is, and you may never know what it is, but the minute you understand that they have pressure on them that you don't know about, you will become a more powerful negotiator. I have done a lot of training in the healthcare industry in the United States, where the way of paying doctors changed dramatically. It went from doctors billing insurance companies for the services they had performed to be more on a capitated rate, where the insurance company paid so much a month whether these people were sick or not. And when this change took place, all the doctors said, we don't have any power in the negotiations anymore because we don't control the money. There may be some truth to that, but the interesting thing is, when I talked to the insurance companies, they didn't like it either. They said, no, we don't have anything to sell. It's the doctors that have something to sell. We move into a town and we need to sign up a top surgery unit, and we can't sell and go in there, I'm going to handle this, whatever they throw at me, I can take care of it. And you develop a confidence in your ability to handle ambiguity. And not only will it make you a much better negotiator, but it will also raise your self-esteem sky high. Your self-esteem is directly related to how comfortable you feel when you don't have control of a situation. Do you feel okay about it, that you can handle it? It's directly related to your thinking, if things go wrong, I can handle it. Some people have a very low self-esteem. If a car won't start in the morning, they just can't handle the day. Other people have a tremendous ability to tolerate things going wrong and still be okay. Directly related to your self-esteem. Another thing that is very important to your success as a negotiator is your not being conflict averse. Conflict averse means you really go out of your way to avoid any conflict at all. In the healthcare industry, where I did a lot of training, doctors are not the fighters of the world. They're the healers of the world. They don't like conflict. So typically doctors would say to me, Roger, we can't be too tough a negotiator in our profession because we're having to deal with the same people over and over again. And if we're too tough, we won't be able to negotiate well with them. And what they're actually saying is, I'm conflict adverse. I don't like the difficulty part of negotiating. I want things to run smoothly without any friction. So some people are very conflict averse. They do all kinds of things to avoid it. Other people love conflict. There are people out there who can't wait to get off work, go to the bar, and have a couple of drinks and pick a fight with somebody. That's not me. I'm sure it's not you either. But if you learn to be comfortable with conflict, you will be a better negotiator. Another thing that's really good for you is resilience. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic, and that is negotiating with Americans. We are now in a world market. If you're not doing business with foreign companies already, you very soon will be. And it's really important for you to understand that other countries negotiate differently than Chinese people do. And understanding those differences makes all the difference in the world in successfully trading with them. You know, it's very easy for us, because we watch the same movies, we listen to the same music, and we dress the same. It's very easy for us to assume that Chinese people and American people think alike, and nothing could be further from the truth. The way the two nationalities think is very, very different. So first of all, I'm going to start out with the two major things that are different between the way Chinese people negotiate and the way that Americans negotiate. Number one, Americans are very much focused on the deal, getting the contract signed. When Donald Trump, a famous New York real estate investor, wrote a book on negotiating, he called it The Art of the Deal. That is the way Americans think of a transaction. It is to lead to signing the contract, and that's the end of the negotiations. So we're very much focused on signing the contract, as opposed to Chinese people, who are very much focused on building the relationship with the other people. So this is the first big difference. Americans think contract. Chinese people think relationships. Or another way of putting that would be that Americans negotiate with companies. Chinese people negotiate with people. So, for example, this can be very difficult for you. An American company has sent somebody over to have an initial meeting with your company to see if you can do some business together. And you take great pains during those few days that the Americans here to build a relationship with that person, to really have a nice, good, trusting relationship with that person. That person goes back to America, and a month later another person is sent, and it's not the same person. And because you think Chinese relationships, you're thinking, that first meeting is of no use to me anymore because it's a different person they've sent now. And I negotiate with people, not with companies. In reality, the relationship may be very, very strong. That first American may have sent a message back, these people are terrific, let's do business with them, just put the details together. Now, part of this is just traditional. It's just the way things have always been. Chinese people want to know and trust the people they deal with. Americans want to get the contract signed. But part of it is practical. In America, they have a very good legal system where you can sue people if they don't stay to the terms of the contract. Now, I don't think that's so true in China, that it really wouldn't be worth the trouble to sue somebody in China unless you had a very, very strong case. And another thing, and this I always have trouble convincing Chinese people this is true, but another thing is, in the United States, you can sue people and still continue to do business with them. Now, I don't think Chinese people would go along with that. If somebody sued you, you wouldn't want to do business with them again anyway, so the relationship would be at an end. So it's a different approach. It's the practical side. In this session, we're going to talk about something that always affects the outcome of a negotiation. There are three basic things that always affect the outcome. This is one of them. And the other two are time pressure. The side under the most time pressure typically does worse in a negotiation. And information power. The side with the most information typically comes out better in a negotiation. So we'll cover those other two later. But today I want to talk to you about your ability to persuade other people. What I'm going to go through is 8 things that give you the ability to influence other people, which is a very critical part of the negotiating process. We'll also see how these 8 things are the things that people can do to you to intimidate you in a negotiation, to cause you to feel that you don't have as much power as you really do. So the first one is legitimate power, and that is basically the power of the title. The minute you get to be promoted to the CEO of your company, you have power that comes along with that. People respect titles. So the way you react to that can make a big difference. If you're too casual in your approach to management, too much just one of the people working there, you start losing your legitimate power. So it comes to people along with the title. So if you have a title, use it, get it on your business card, your nameplate, your letterhead, and so on. But on the other hand, don't be intimidated because the other person has a fancy title. Some of these titles don't mean a thing. My daughter, Julia, graduated from the University of Southern California with a business finance degree. And she went to work for Dean Witter, a New York stockbroker, with branches all over the country. And she hadn't been with Dean Witter very long before she was talking about becoming a vice president at Dean Witter. And I said, Julia, come on, you've got to set realistic expectations. This is a huge corporation. It may take you years and years to become a vice president. And she said, oh no, I think I'll be a vice president by the end of the year. I said, well, how many vice presidents does Dean Witter have? She said, I don't know, it must be thousands. We've got 35 in this one office, simply because they understand titles influence people. So use your title, but don't be intimidated by your title. Another form of legitimate power is positioning in the marketplace. If you can say we are the oldest manufacturer of this product in the province, that gives you some authority in the marketplace. It really doesn't matter how you do it. You can say we're the oldest or we're the newest. You can say we perform the broadest range of services or products, or we specialize more than anybody else. It really doesn't matter how you do it. It's how you separate yourself from the competition that gives you an authority in the marketplace. Inspected it already. This concrete's beginning to set up, and he said, no, I haven't. And he was right. We'd missed it. We thought he'd signed off on it. He took a quick glance around, looked at it, looked fine to him, signed off on it, and we continued. We had to dig out the concrete to show it to him, and then we poured it back in and got on with the business of building the houses. But that situation power, in certain circumstances, people have enormous situation power over you. The people I think of these days are the people who do the security checks at airports. I remember doing a program for an insurance company in Michigan, and I had a 25-minute flight from Lansing, Michigan, down to the big airport at Detroit, Michigan, and then change planes and fly home for 4 hours to my home in Southern California. I went through the archway at Lansing Airport, and it beeped, and they said to me, "Roger, go over there, take your shoes off, open up your bag." I survived that search. I went up to the gate where they were boarding people, and was when they were randomly pulling people out of line for extra security checks. And I got pulled out of line again, and I cleared that security check. I went down to Detroit, went over to my new gate, and got pulled out of line again. And I said, "I am not doing this. This is absolutely ridiculous. This will be the third time in an hour that you've searched me. Now you know who I am. I'm on your computer. I've flown over 800,000 miles with you." I almost said, and I haven't hijacked a plane yet, but in a rare moment of restraint, I thought, I better not say that. In our last session together, we talked about something that always affects the outcome of negotiations, and that's how intimidated are you by the other side. In this session, we're going to talk about the other two things that always affect the outcome of negotiations. Time pressure, the side under the most time pressure typically does worse, and information power, the side with the most information typically does better in a negotiation. So let's start out with time pressure. There is a Pareto principle that applies here. Pareto was a 19th century Italian economist, the first person to point out that 80% of the wealth of Italy was in the hands of 20% of the people. And that 80-20 rule seems to work in a lot of other areas too. School teachers tell me that 80% of the trouble is caused by 20% of the kids. In seminars, 80% of the questions are asked by 20% of the students. Probably in your business, 80% of your problems are caused by 20% of your customers. So that 80-20 rule seems to work in a lot of other areas too. What does it teach you? We say in negotiating that 80% of the concessions come down in the last 20% of the time available to negotiate. That became very clear to me when I was a real estate broker in Southern California. Typically the escrow period in California, that's the period from the time the buyer and the seller reach agreement and sign a contract to the time they get the financing arranged and actually transfer the title of the property, is about 10 weeks. If a problem arose in that first 8 weeks of the escrow period, it would very often cause the transaction to fall apart. If the problem came up in the last 20% of the time available to negotiate, we could very often find enough flexibility among the partners to resolve the problem. So people become flexible under time pressure. Your children know that, don't they? When do your children ask you for something? Just at the last minute, right? Just as you're leaving the house or they're leaving the house, they know that that's the easiest time to get something. My younger son John would drive me over to Los Angeles Airport for a speaking tour. That's about an hour's drive for us. We don't talk about anything of consequence on the way over there. Until we get curbside and we've got the luggage on the cart, I'm about to race off and try and catch that plane. And I hear him saying, "Dad, I'm sorry, I forgot. I need $100 to fix the muffler on my car." And I say, "John, don't do this to me. I teach this stuff. Now, how come this hasn't come up before?" And he said, "Well, Dad, I'm sorry, I forgot, but I've got a fix-it ticket on the car." Police have stopped him and told him he's got to get it fixed. "And I need to get it done before you get back from your trip. Let me have the money now. I'll explain it to you later." Instinctively, they understand that under time pressure, you become flexible. So what does it teach you? Don't negotiate under time pressure. Resolve all the issues up front. If you hear the expression, "Oh, we can work that out later," alarm bells should go off in your mind. Very often in the early stages of a negotiation, an issue is raised and who's going to pay for this? Oh, that won't be a big problem. We'll be able to work that out later. It might not be a big problem if you resolved it now. It could become a very big problem if you wait until the last minute and now you're in for the final signing of the papers and this issue is, oh, we never did decide who was going to pay for this. And all of a sudden you've got a big problem that doesn't have to be a big problem. So anytime you hear the expression, we can work that out later, it's not going to be a problem, alarm bells should go off in your mind. So you can have a situation where both sides are approaching the same time deadline. Now, this would be true in the case of any renewal of any contract that you have with people. But let's take a simpler example on that. Let's say that you lease your office space, and the lease is due for renewal next July the 1st. And you hear about time pressure, and you think to yourself, oh, I think what I'll do here is I'll wait until the very last minute to renew the lease with the landlord, which will put the landlord under the most time pressure, and I'll do better that way. Sounds good. But you think about it for a while, and then you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, what's the difference between me waiting until the last minute to renegotiate this lease, or the landlord waiting to renew this lease at the last minute, putting me under the most time pressure? So here we've got both sides approaching the same time deadline. And the question is, which side should use time pressure and which side should avoid time pressure? And the answer is that the side with the most power in a negotiation can use time pressure. The side with less power, it doesn't mean they're going to lose the negotiation, but it does mean that they have to negotiate differently, and one of the things they need to do is avoid being under time pressure.